Before we get into it, I think there's something very important that I need help you to understand. And what we really need to do is we need to take a look at the relationship between the root note of the scale and the seventh note of the scale. So I have a C major scale up on the screen, and we're looking to see how the seventh note of the scale relates to the root note of the scale. I want to do sort of an illustration on the guitar, so I hope you'll indulge me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the note C that's at the 5th fret of the G string. We're going to call C our root note. In the C major scale, B is the 7th note of the scale. Now, if we look at our B or our C note that we have at the 5th fret on the G string, the B note is right next to it at the 4th fret. So this is the first thing that I need you to understand. If we have the root note at the 5th fret, the note that represents the 7th can be found 1/2 step or 1 fret below that note on the same string. So if the root is at the 5th fret, C, the 7th note of the scale, B, is at the 4th fret. So now we're on B, and B is the 7th note of the scale. However, if we flat this note, we'll get B flat. And B flat is at the 3rd fret on the G string. From the root note, which in this case is C at the 5th fret, to get to the flatted 7th note, we really only have to go down a whole step or 2 frets. So if the root is at the 5th fret, the flatted 7th is at the 3rd fret. And this is very important for us to understand. Let's talk about the fingerings for some of these chords. There's a couple rules that we need to follow here, because what we're going to do is we're going to take existing chord fingerings and we're going to modify them so that we can get our major 7th, our dominant 7th, and our minor 7th chords. So the first thing we need to follow is that we need at least 4 strings, because there are 4 separate notes in this scale. So we need at least 4 strings. And whatever fingering we choose, we must have the root note twice in the fingering. The next chord I want to look at is D major. And what I want to do is I want to start with our D major chord, our 3-string D major chord that has the root note at the 3rd fret of the B string. So I'm going to find my root note at the 3rd fret of the B string, and then I'm going to apply my major chord fingering. That is our 3-string D major chord. So now what we want to do is we want to add a 4th string to this chord. I can add the open D string because it's the root note of the chord. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add the open D string, and now I have a 4-note D major chord. And I also have the root note twice. I have the root note at the 3rd fret on the B string, and I also have the root note as the open D string. So we're going to have to modify one of those notes. Now, the D that we're playing as an open string is as low as it can go. So we're going to leave that D note alone, and that will remain as our root note. So what we want to do is we want to look to this other D note that's at the 3rd fret of the B string. So we have the major chord. If we want to go to the major 7th, we need to take that D note and we need to lower it by a 1/2 step or down 1 fret. Well, our D note is at the 3rd fret of the B string. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to play the note that's at the 2nd fret of the B string. So now we're going to be playing at the 2nd fret on all 3 of the G, B, and E strings. So I'm going to replace that with a bar. And I'm just going to bar across the 2nd fret on all 3 strings and add in the open D, and now we have our D major 7th chord. Again, we took our root note, which was at the 3rd fret. When we play with like that, we have the D major. When I take that note and I lower it by 1 fret, now we get the D major 7th chord. So now let's look at the dominant, D dominant 7th chord. So let's go back to where we started, which was our D major chord. To go from a major chord to a dominant 7th chord, we need to add the note that's the flatted 7. And the flatted 7 note is 2 frets below the root note on the same string. So we have our root note D at the 3rd fret. So what we want to do is we want to change that note from the D at the 3rd fret to the C at the 1st fret. So what happens is we're going to have to change our fingering a little. I'm going to take my index finger and I'm going to put that on the 1st fret of the B string. And then I'm going to take my middle and ring fingers and put them back to play those notes that we played with the D major chord. So I've only changed one note of the chord, even though my fingering has changed a bit. And when we add the C note to these other notes, we get our D dominant 7 chord. And again, it's important for us to understand that line that works off this B string, because we have the root at the 3rd fret. When we take it to the 2nd fret, we get the 7th note, so we can get our major 7th chord. And when we take it to the 1st fret, it becomes the flatted 7th. So to contrast the 3 chords, we have the D major, then we drop this D down to the 2nd fret and play the C sharp note, and now we have the D major 7th. And when we drop it down to the 1st fret, we change up our fingering a little bit, and now we have our D dominant 7th chord. I'm going to start with our 3-string D minor chord, and I'm going to choose my root note on the 3rd fret of the D string. So I'm going to apply my 3-string fingering. So this is our D minor chord. And in order to turn this into a 4-note chord, we're going to do the same thing we did with the D major chord. So all we're going to do is we're going to add in this open D string. So now we have a 4-string D minor chord. We have the open D root note, and we have the root note at the 3rd fret on the B string. We're going to turn our attention to the D note that's at the 3rd fret on the B string. So we have the minor chord. If we want to go to the minor 7th chord, we need to add the note that's the flatted 7th. The flatted 7th note is 2 frets below the root note. So the root note is at the 3rd fret. So what we need to do is we need to change this note to the C note at the 1st fret. So what that means is I'm going to be playing at the 1st fret on the E and B strings. So I'm going to go ahead and just bar those two together. And then I'm still playing at the 2nd fret on the G string. And I'm just going to reach up with my middle finger and play that note. And when we add our D string to it, we have our D minor 7 chord. Now the thing about this is the chord looks a lot different than the D minor chord. And what I think is really helps to do is to practice going from the D minor chord and seeing that root note at the 3rd fret, and then realizing, okay, we're going to drop that down by a fret. Everything else is going to stay the same. So literally my middle finger can stay where it is, and then I'm just going to bar across the 1st fret for the E and the B strings, and we have the D minor 7th chord. So put in your time, put in your work, and I hope to see you there. Peace.